Hello, hello. What's up? What's up? It is a new day, it is a new week, and it's time to get social. My name is KaVonna, and welcome to the Introvert's Social Hour. Thank you for joining the Introvert Social Hour. Today's topic is about the struggle of finding confidence in yourself, but especially in your work and your artistry. I did bring two friends, specifically creative friends, for separate conversations on this topic. So if you have not listened to part one of this conversation of crisis and confidence, stop now, go back, listen to part one, and then come back to finish listening to part two. Part two, I am having a conversation with my friend Nicole, so I'm super excited to talk about that. Stay tuned. Our next conversation in regards to crisis and confidence is with my friend Nicole. Y'all know Nicole. Nicole was in my top 5 rom-coms episode, and I am so excited to have them back. But for those who don't know Nicole, first off, go listen to the top 5 rom-coms episode. But to give you an introduction on who they are, Nicole Sowers is a queer writer based in Los Angeles. They've been writing since they were 8 years old, and it doesn't get any easier. And I totally get that into the creative aspect. So please welcome Nicole. Woo woo.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's a beautiful bright morning. It's not too hot yet, which is awesome because it is starting to be toasty.
Yeah, I've been jealous of the weather out there because right now it's been incredibly warm. For our viewers, at the time we're recording right now in summer, and New York has been incredibly humid, inconsistent weather. Literally, I got outside at like 9 in the morning and it felt like I was in a sauna, and I was
Oh.
like, this is unfair. So I feel that. I want that breeze.
Mhm.
Um So today we're talking about crisis and confidence. I had my first conversation with my friend Jasimran, and we talked about specifically like crisis and confidence with our creative journeys.
Mhm.
Um, and we all have different ones. Jasimran is a visual development artist, and I do dance, and you're a writer. So I did want to talk about it because even though we all have different creative aspects, confidence in our creative journeys could look very similar. And
Mhm.
I was wondering that. So I definitely wanted to pull y'all for these convos. And we've talked about it before, which is why it inspired um to record it and put it on the podcast, because it was such like a valuable conversation to me.
Mhm.
So to get an idea of like your personal journey and like finding confidence as would you as an author, I'm gonna call you an author. Yeah.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
take it.
um, when did you know you wanted to be an author? Well, when did you make that decision in your career?
Um, Interestingly, I feel like it was never a hard decision of like now I've decided to become an author, and
Mhm.
even confidence plays such a huge role in it, as even in the simple fact of defining yourself as an author versus a writer. That's something that has come up with a lot of writer groups that I'm in, where people are like, oh well, I write things but I'm not an author. That's like an elevated level where you're, you know some people define it as when you're published you become an author, when you've written x amount you become an author. But honestly, like, I think that is a certain level of creative confidence where you claim that term. So I never really had a moment where I was like, I've decided that I'm an author now. But like I said in my like you said in my introduction, I've been writing since I was 8 years old, and it started as like, stories I was telling myself. The very first one that I can define, like I wrote, that was, I had this stuffed animal named Cat, who was a cat, and I would lose him literally all the time. And I would freak out every time because I'd be like, he's gone forever. Ah! And my mom was like, calm down. It's literally fine. He's just on a trip and he's going to show up again sometime. And when he does, he'll have an adventure to tell you about. And so I started writing Cat's Adventures, which were, these 1-page short stories about, where he had gone on his travels. And you could tell what I was studying in history at the time because it would literally be like everything that I was learning in world history. He would go to ancient Egypt, he went to ancient Greece, he went to France. Like, it was, you could track very literally.
Mhm.
And when that kind of became something that I was considering as a career was more in late high school, college era, where I was writing and sharing my writing with other people, and I started kind of thinking to myself, like, this is actually kind of good. I wonder, can I sell this to somebody? And I had a short story that I sold to an anthology in 2019, and I was like, oh,
Ooh.
I can do this.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I look back on that short story and I'm like, oh man, there's like 90 different things I would change about it to make it much better now. But
Mhm.
that was kind of where things took a turn, where I was like, oh, this, like, I could do something with this. And the transition to thinking about being a novel author and trying that process out kind of came in 2020, when I was, in my lockdown era of, I need to find something to do with myself. So I started writing
Mhm.
the story, and I thought, this is something that I think, at the very least, I'm very proud of. So I would be proud to have that represent me as a debut novel. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm working on right now.
Nice. I will say, just Simran and I talked about this, in regards to art always changes. And so every creative person, artist is gonna look back at something they did in their journey and be like, ah, that wasn't, you know. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that's so true. Which is why we had like talked about like why it's so ridiculous that we end up being so hard on ourselves sometimes,
Hmm.
because it's like that's the purpose of art. It's not gonna be perfect. Like it's
Yeah,
supposed to have flaws. So I'm really glad you mentioned that part because it's so true.
exactly. And it does help my confidence to look back and be like, oh man, like, ew,
Mhm.
I'm not happy with every aspect of that story, but somebody still liked it enough to literally pay me money for it. So that's
Exactly.
a big boost to my confidence whenever I'm feeling down.
Yeah. Ah, I'm so glad you mentioned that one because that was literally what we had talked about, and that's like a perfect like example. Um, so you pretty much knew your creative journey's kind of been a thing almost your whole life in a way, which is
Yeah.
really cool to say. As far as career wise, you kind of already said it, but I do want to know what your creative journey has been like in regards to your like ability to like grow, and also like has there been any blocks along the way? I know writer block's a thing for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Um, it I think that kind of connects to what I was just saying about skill development and creative ability growth, being able to look back on that short story from 2019 and name a bunch of things I would do differently. It has a lot to do with the two kind of aspects that I've found in the skills that contribute to my writing ability, which are my creative skills, which is my ability to produce writing and take
Mhm.
something from my head and put it down into words in a way that evokes the feeling that I want it to and has readers connecting with it. And then
Mhm.
there's also the critical side, which is being able to read other things and break them down into, what do I really like about this? What do I want to artistically steal? This
Yeah.
makes me feel a certain way. How do I recreate that in my work? Whether it's
Mhm.
in homage or it's just looking at the structure of something or how a story is told. And those things develop at different rates.
Mhm.
Like, I
Yeah.
started really strong with my critical skills because a lot of my education is in what I call reading skills, which is, I have an English literature degree. And so I've
Mhm.
studied a lot of classical writing and things like that to kind of borrow these skills. And only recently has my creative side more taken the forefront.
Mhm.
And that's been really interesting because as my critical skills develop, I look back on things that I created, and it was the height of my creative skills at that time. And I look back on it and go, now that
Yeah.
I have developed my critical skills a little bit more, I look back on that with a little bit of more critical eye. And sometimes that can be really hard when my critical skills are higher than what I'm able to produce on the creative side. That's
Mhm.
where I tend to get the most blocks of, like, I'm trying to put this down and it's not working. And all I can see is how it's not working instead of
Mm.
how it's worlds better than what I created last year or the year before. Um,
Yeah.
so that's, but funnily enough, identifying that arc, I guess, of like, I have a bump in my creative skills and then I have a bump in my critical skills. And I look back on my creative skills and see how it's lacking.
Mhm.
But recognizing that that's not a forever state. Like, I will develop those
Mm-hmm.
skills instead of getting stuck in that, like, I'm never going to be able to get to the level I want to be. No,
Yeah.
it's just going to take time. And frequently I find my critical skills are a little
Mhm.
bit ahead of my creative skills.
Okay. I'm gonna jump a little bit because I
Mhm.
wanna. So, how did you get to that point of like, it's okay, it takes time?
Um,
Where did you get to that point of like accepting that? Out of
I,
curiosity.
I think it was like identifying that those are two separate skills.
Mhm,
I tried to find it for you, but I couldn't find the exact one that I had.
mhm,
A graph that somebody made
mhm,
discussing this idea of like critical skills versus creative skills when it comes to artistic development, and
mhm,
seeing that I was like, that's what I'm experiencing, where all I can see are flaws in my work and I don't know how to fix them because I
mhm,
don't have the developed skills yet, or I just haven't sat with it long enough to decide like what it is it going to take this from, a 5 out of 10 to an 8, 9, 10 out of
mhm.
10.
Okay.
And also, another thing that helped was reading a lot of other people's works, whether it was published works and finding ones that I'm like, well, this could have been improved, but it still is really good. And
Mhm.
being able to tell myself that like it's okay to not be perfect.
Yeah.
It can still be really good.
Mhm,
And reading things from my peers who are unpublished and seeing like their work is really good and they're not represented or have a lot of published work yet, but they're
mhm,
going to get there. And uh, it was weird how I was able to extend that to other people first before being able to reflect it on myself, but it
mhm.
was a part of it to say like, I can believe in other people really strongly. Why can't I turn that inward?
Yeah, and that's like the interesting, like I would say like phenomena. It's like
Hmm.
why is that like we're so quickly to give grace to other people, and it's for some reason it's so much more difficult to give it to ourselves. Um, in connection to that, I did
Hmm.
want to like ask like confidence tends to be a connection to a few different things, specifically like lack of confidence that can fall into a few categories, whether it's like being fear of being judged, having fear of being judged, imposter syndrome. It could also come from the idea of like comparison to others, right?
Hmm.
Um, how has looking at other people's works and their creative journeys impacted your confidence in your work and your journey?
It it can really depend on a lot of things. There's
Mhm.
different levels to it. I think of, I think a lot of creatives have that social media experience where you
Oh,
see the amazing things that other people are doing and you think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that, or
yeah.
I'm never going to get the recognition that this person is getting, even though
Mhm.
I'm doing something that's just as good or even better. I've had that thought before where I'm like, how is this something that people are obsessed with when,
Yeah.
it's not very good? And
Mhm.
I know a lot of people who have better work, and egotistically sometimes I put myself in there where I'm like,
Hey,
I could do better.
yeah, go ahead, confidence.
Yeah. So there's two sides to it. And on the other hand, there's, like I mentioned, reading other people's works, people that I am fans of, and seeing how impressed I am with them and being able to take inspiration from like they're out there doing this and doing it flawlessly, and whether they are struggling with confidence or not, they have come up with this amazing thing. So you can still create something great, even if you don't
Mhm.
necessarily believe in it as much as the people who read it do. Like,
Yeah.
we're our own worst critics most of the time. So being able to recognize that in other people, and again, say like, oh, when do I do that? And try and catch that instead of just being really hard on myself and letting that
Mhm.
be it.
Yeah. I
And oh,
Oh, no, go ahead, continue.
okay. And as far as rejection goes, unfortunately, when it comes to writing, rejection is like 99% of the game.
Mhm.
Like, especially when it comes to um, commercial literary, like trying to sell a short story or a novel, there's rejection at literally every step of the process.
Yeah.
If you're trying to sell a short story, you write it, you send it to people for feedback, you're going to get various levels of rejection, as far as like, oh, I didn't think this worked. This was confusing, this needs to be rewritten. Like,
Mhm.
that's always part of the process. And then you want to go on and try and sell it, and you can send it to a bunch of different markets, and even if it's quite good, there are a million reasons why you still might get a rejection, as far as like quite good but not as good as what they're looking for. It could
Yeah.
be too similar to something that they're trying to that they have just bought already. um and the same goes for the process of becoming a novelist. At least in traditional publishing in the United States, it is such a long process that is rejection after rejection after rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So that in and of itself has been hard, but at the same time, it's been encouraging in other ways where I'm like, I've gotten plenty of rejection, but I didn't die, like there's always that fear
Exactly.
of like, oh, like I'm going to be rejected and then that's going to be it. It's over. But
Mm-hmm.
it's baked into the process. And I think allowing that to be like, I'm going to get a lot of rejection before I get any amount of
Mm-hmm.
acceptance. And sometimes that's my skills are not there yet. And that's just a sign that I need to keep working on that. And sometimes it's just not a right fit for that person at that time.
Yeah.
And reorienting myself to that of like, what I have is not bad. It's not right for this person. And sure, maybe it could be better and appeal to different people, but that doesn't mean that it's unreadable, which is always the thing that, like, when I'm in my lowest of self-confidence, I'm like, ugh, I've written something that is incomprehensible. Nobody will be able to understand it.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. It may not appeal to somebody enough for them to say, I want to represent you, I want to give you money. That's
Mm-hmm.
We live in a world that isn't really supportive of artists in that way.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect to it where it's like, through you can make something good and it may not be good enough to sell at the same time.
Yeah. And it's also super competitive too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was talking to just Simran about that in a sense of like, no matter what creative like journey we're on, I feel like every creative field is incredibly competitive. Like as a dancer, I knew a whole bunch of dancers in California. And I moved to New York, and there's dancers everywhere as well. And
Mm-hmm.
mind you, there's dancers in every state, in every country. Like everybody's dancing. So we're
Mm-hmm.
all kind of competing for. Unfortunately, like it is competing for like this goal, whatever it may be. There's different paths as a dancer, of course, just like there's different paths as an author and an artist. But I think that's what makes it hard as well. Because you're kind of like fighting for a spot. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of where I start to at least my brain starts to easily compare. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm trying to get I'm working on getting better at not comparing, but also in the sense of like, oh, they're always posting on their socials. Everybody sees their dance. The dance game is so strong. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they're doing so great. I'm not posting nothing. I haven't even taken a dance class in 2 days. Like, and it's like, girl, like, seriously. So I try to tell myself to like calm down a bit. Um, in that sense, like everyone has their own path too.
Mm-hmm.
So um I definitely try to like recenter. It's like you're not that person, and maybe there's someone out there that wants that person to be on a tour or be on a Broadway show, but maybe there's a person out there for you who wants what you have.
Mm-hmm.
So I always try to remind myself of the importance of like individuality. Like there's something that I bring to table that someone else doesn't, and vice versa, because we are our own people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
I definitely try to do that, but once again, it's a work in progress
Oh
for sure.
yeah. And some days are definitely better than others. Some days I'm like, you know, screw all the comparison. I know what my value is, and I'm going to keep doing my thing and keep doing it flawlessly. And then some days I'm like, it's never going to happen. Like I might as well give up and you know go
Yeah.
work in a bank or something.
Oh, at the bank. Yeah. It is an up and down journey, which is
Mhm.
I think also the annoying part. Cause
Oh
it's
yeah.
like I kind of get mad at myself. Like, why can't I just stay up the whole time? Like, let me just be confident the whole entire time. Like, cause I do in low key, once again, weird loop of confidence, like a confidence battle. I kind of talk about this with just Simran as well.
Mhm.
This is a different loop though, but I'll tell you about the loop that we talked about. Seeing someone who's confident in themselves and in their creative journey, and then I get low confidence about myself, about me not being confident about my creative journey.
Oh
Isn't that
yes.
so annoying?
Yes, it is because you I always end up, I'm like, I only have myself to blame. Like I and that self-blame doesn't help anybody.
Mhm.
And especially seeing somebody who's really confident in themselves when I feel like it's a little undeserving. Like, I feel like there's a frequently touted saying where people like try and have the confidence of a mediocre white man, because
Mhm.
there are
Yeah.
especially in writing and authorship, there's a lot of just okay writers, especially in categories where they're
Mhm.
used to being supported,
Yeah.
um where they're like, I can do anything, like anything I create is going to be amazing. And it's like, I appreciate the confidence, but also you could work on some things as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can turn into spite writing, which is kind
Mhm.
of fun, where I'm like, I have to, I know I can do better than this person who is, acting like they hung the moon. So I'm going to do better. And
Yeah.
that that's a different kind of look that you can get on sometimes, which
Mhm.
sometimes it can yield some really interesting things.
I agree with that. I had recently, I cannot remember. It was an interview of some actress. I'm so sorry, I can't remember. But it was within the last 2 months or so. They're like, how did you get to a point of just like confidence in yourself and like, your abilities? And she said, I would go watch bad shows to build
Yeah.
myself up. Like, because if she's
Yeah.
like, if they can be on stage, that means
Yes,
I can be on stage.
exactly.
It just hasn't
Sometimes,
happened yet.
yeah, sometimes finding, like, especially as a writer, you find a book, like there are a few that, like, you see
Mm.
them trending on TikTok and things like that. And I'm like, I don't get it. I
Yeah.
don't get the hype. I read it. I didn't think it was very good. I don't know why it's on all these lists of like best in its genre.
100%. I do want to say, really quick plug on that. Recent book I read that
Hmm.
TikTok was hyping up. Oh my gosh, so good. I'm trying to get into mysteries more. So good. The greatest mystery ever. Don't Let Her Stay. I can't remember the author. I read it because TikTok hyped it up, and it was not it.
Oh no.
So, but once again, proof that things, I mean, once again, there's something for everyone.
Exactly.
So maybe some people out there really loved it, but it
Hmm.
wasn't for me. But the author found their audience and it
Yeah.
worked for them. So you never know.
Yeah, that's another thing I can do when I find something I don't like. First, there's a couple levels to it where it's like, how do some people really love this? Like, I
Hmm.
can do better than that. And then I get to another point of like, well, it really didn't appeal to me, but it was still really popular with the readers that it hit for. So
Yeah.
that can contribute to my confidence as well. When somebody doesn't like what I've written, I can say,
Hmm.
well, it didn't appeal to them. That doesn't mean that the work itself is bad.
Yeah.
Obviously there's always things that can be improved, but it's not worth, oh, throw it out because this one reader really didn't vibe with it. No, that's
Exactly.
not the right fit for that work. And just like I'm not the right fit for a lot of works that appeal to other people.
Yeah. So that's a good reminder too. Like
Hmm.
once again, rejection happens, but like maybe
Hmm.
you just haven't found the person that's gonna understand it.
Yeah. And
Oh, go ahead.
another in that vein, another thing that has helped with my confidence sometimes is like when I find something I really do enjoy.
Hmm.
I don't do this all the time because it often like just makes me really annoyed. I look up the 1-star good reviews
Oh,
because
hilarious.
there's always somebody that like fully misinterpreted it and are getting mad about something that is not really in the book, and it's hilarious on some levels and really frustrating on others because I put myself in the place of the author of like, I would be so I would be fuming. So I
Mhm.
know when I make it, I am not going to be one of those people that reads good reviews because it's not going to
Yeah.
help me. It's just going to
Uh-huh.
make me annoyed for something that's already published. Like,
Mhm.
I can't go back and change it. So you
100%.
you can have your opinion over there
Yeah.
away from me.
I agree. I think for me, social you know how I feel in weird part about like social media and stuff, but when those videos are posted and I got more followers and there's gonna be more people commenting and things like that, I'm probably
Mhm.
not gonna be looking at them. um, yeah, I agree with that too.
Especially because on the internet, negativity gets platformed a lot more. Like it's
Hmm.
divisive things like that cause more interaction usually.
Yeah.
So people tend to prefer to make the quick dunk on something, especially something that people like, for internet points,
Oh
just
yeah.
so people will be like, oh yeah, like,
Mhm.
my number one thing that I always think of is CinemaSins. They talk about movies, especially their reviews of great movies.
Mhm.
Nope is one of my favorite movies from the past few years, and watching
I
their
agree.
video makes me furious, because it's like you're you're just trying to dunk on something that people really like, because people who do people who haven't seen it, or people who didn't want to like it anyway, are like,
Mhm.
yeah, when half of the things they bring up require a huge misunderstanding of the work that they're watching. It's
Yeah.
so
That's been another thing too. Yeah. So many different ideas on like movies or TV shows and things.
mhm.
So I definitely agree with that.
So
Um
there's always going to be people that don't like what you're putting out, and that doesn't make them right.
yeah, exactly. Everyone's got their own taste. Yeah.
Mhm.
With this like struggle with confidence, and once again, as we said, it's like an up and down battle. I
Mhm.
feel like there's no for sure answer. Um, what strategies though have you used to try to overcome these challenges of self-doubt and try to help build your confidence up?
There are a few things, and I feel like I'm always adding more tools to my arsenal, especially since I kind of had this realization of my confidence in my creative ability. Those are so closely tied. Like, if I am feeling down about my work, I can't write. That when I'm in that lull that
Mhm.
I talked about, that writer's block, it's usually very closely tied to feeling a lot of self-doubt. So almost every time I feel like I add a new thing to my tool belt of like different ways that I can bring myself back around. And I've talked about a couple of them already. Reading things that I really enjoy, and looking at reviews, positive and negative, to remind myself that there are going to be
Yeah.
people that love it, and there are going to be people that don't. And, I can't control that. I'm writing for the people that love it. And
Yeah.
that who I'm writing for and why has also been a really strong one, because
Mhm.
especially because I started as a writer as a kid, just telling myself stories,
Mhm.
and writing for myself, something that I enjoy, is going to bring a lot of authenticity to it that the right group is going to connect with. And the people who don't connect with it, that's fine. That's their business.
Yeah.
Um, so writing for myself instead of trying to appeal to people that weren't going to like it anyway has been another thing, especially when I get like feedback that is like really strongly negative and not really doing anything for my confidence. I'm like, well, I'm going to discount some of this, because it's clear that this person is not there isn't connecting with it, and for
Mhm.
whatever reason that is. Like, there are things that can be improved, obviously, but on a certain level, this isn't the reader for this work.
Yeah.
And trying to appeal to somebody who's like, I didn't like this, and this, and it's like fundamental parts of the work. If I tried to appeal to that one reader, it would either fundamentally change the story
Mhm.
or totally gut it, and there would be nothing left. So
Yeah.
keeping that emotional core of like, I'm writing for me and the people who are going to see what I'm writing and connect with it, and the people who aren't are already planning not to connect with it are not my business.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good way to take it. Like as we said, like there's things that are out of your control.
yeah.
And I always go back to, I had also mentioned this to just, I mean, like finding the joy. Like
Mhm.
you enjoyed it. You said you started like around 8 years old. I found my way in and out of dance throughout the years. And I was like, I always keep coming back to it. There's a reason I keep coming back to it. So like there's a purpose for why you're doing it in the first place. So just like
Mhm.
remembering why you love to do it, and it's all about you, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like let yourself be selfish in your work. And yes, in the creative aspect, you do kind of need those stamps of approval to get further and make it a career.
Mhm.
But like, just know, like, enjoy the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love creative work. I think
Yeah.
we step into a very, I think that's what makes it kind of a struggle with confidence, is because choosing to be a creative is a very vulnerable decision.
Yes, I was going to bring that up as
Mhm.
what you were talking about just before, that like as much art is always a reflection of the artist in some way.
Yeah.
So it's putting a piece of yourself out in the world to be judged. And it's
Hmm.
always going to be a vulnerable position because, for dance, it's like you and your body and the skills and experience that you've built up through your time as a dancer. And with writing, it's similar. Like you're putting
Hmm.
your experience and your worldview and your style and voice out there in the world, and when people react negatively to it, it really feels like I don't like you,
Hmm.
because it is a piece of you that you're putting out there, and that can be really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also too like low key a words of affirmation person.
Mm,
So if I put my art out and it's just crickets, I'm like, anybody want to say something? I'm like,
yeah, what is exterior motivation, like support
yeah,
from people outside of you,
yeah.
really makes a difference. Even that, like, I keep a lot of old comments. Like I share my work digitally with people, and if
Hmm.
there's a comment on something that's like, "Oh, I really love this," I don't clear that comment for as long as I can, because I'm like, I need this nugget. I need to come back to it sometimes and be like, yes,
Yeah.
somebody connected with that. Even if I was like, oh, this is a silly like throwaway line, it's just a little joke.
Hmm.
Um, and people who are like, oh, I love that. It
Yeah.
it helps a lot. Those little nuggets.
Yeah. So that's even another way, another like, strategy, just
Mm-hmm.
like it's vulnerable to share your work, but getting those responses
Mm-hmm.
are also super helpful. So
Yeah. And there
mm.
is a practice that in some of the writing groups that I'm in that I have really enjoyed, which is what we call a positivity pass, which is you're
Ooh,
not
okay.
going through to say like, oh, you missed a comma here, or this doesn't make sense, or the characterization is weird here. No, you're
Hmm.
going through to say, I like this and this and this, and you're doing great, and I love you, and keep going. Especially for those early drafts where you're like, it's kind of messy. I don't know what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Having those positivity passes helps you keep it up through those messy middle drafts until you're getting to something where you're like, this is really where it's starting to come together.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, I'm thinking like how I can implement that in like the dance world as well.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be cool. Uh,
Yeah, I'm
mhm.
envisioning like you just almost like a dance circle at a club, but everybody just like
Yeah.
shows what they've got, and you're just cheering for everybody else. This isn't a time
Yeah.
to take a video and say, oh, your positioning wasn't great there. No, we're
Mhm.
just cheering.
Yeah, to be honest, we kind of do that already in a sense of like just like grooving, but I would be curious to see like how you could like try to implement a new move and like be like, ooh, or what if we had like this? That'd be like, as a creative community thing, that'd be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll play around with that. But to start wrapping it up, I do want to say that for my listeners, once again, it's a journey. I just always thought that this would be like a really important conversation after speaking to Nicole about it personally. Like I thought like this would be really helpful to talk about with other people or talk like to and let other people hear it. Um this conversation could literally go on forever.
Oh yeah.
Which is why it's like a two-part episode. But listeners, let us know if you have any strategies, what has been your journey with confidence, whether creatively or just like personally, because we didn't necessarily dive into that, but those can tie in a lot of the times too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining on this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course, as always. You are someone who's on here quite often, so the listeners should know you now. Um, for staying update with Nicole and what Nicole is doing, you can go ahead and check out their website, nsowers.com. That's nsowers.com to find out what they're doing, what's the latest drop. When they're official published author, you can get the news on that too.
Oh
That'll be a
yeah.
fun time listening back to this podcast. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much for listening to this podcast episode. I hope that you did listen to part one and part two with both Jasimran and Nicole. I thought this episode topic was super important. Once again, as I said previously, something that's not talked about. And I thought that having it in a two-part just means that there was more to say and it was valuable, and someone could take something from either of my guests and kind of pull, or even from me and pull. So I really enjoyed having multiple perspectives on this topic, because I don't know about y'all, but I find struggles in this in and out. I could be on my best day one day and the next day just be a complete mess, beating myself up. We are our worst enemy. But at the end of the day, enjoy your craft, enjoy your creative journey. The worst that someone can do is say no. So make sure you just kind of like enjoy the process and don't forget why you did it and why you started this journey in the first place. It's because you love it, it's because you enjoy it. And you're doing it for the reasons, for you, for your like kind of like fulfillment. And just do it. Don't beat yourself up. Easier said than done, but I do want to roll into the process of making sure you have resources for yourself. What does it look like to catch yourself in one of those moments of lacking confidence or losing confidence, and how do you build yourself back up again? And I see these in questions because everyone is different and everyone does not process these things the same. So making sure that you find those resources for yourself, maybe find those people, who are those people that you can go to. So just making sure that you have a support system and a supportive community, and even then those people along the way, or whatever that is that you're doing along the way, that can also help you find inspiration along your creative journey. So you never really know. But once again, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. If comfortable, share with us your experience about your confidence journey. When did you figure out that you needed to build it up? When did you find out that you were confident or you lack confidence, or what has that journey looked like for you? I am curious. Drop that information in the Q&A section on Spotify as always. Make sure you share, like, and follow this podcast. Send it to a friend, send it to a family member, a loved one. Follow me at KaVonna on Instagram to stay updated on podcasts notifications as well. I drop it every time a new podcast is coming out for the week. Um, I appreciate y'all. So thank you so much. And thank you for being here on this part of my creative journey. Get some sunshine, get some air, have an amazing week. I will see you next week on the Introvert Social Hour. Thanks for joining. Bye.